My name is Taylor Newell. I'm the Director of High Performance Computing at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. I'm extremely pleased to have Mark Ross, the CEO of GridMarkets, with us today. And actually, like Mark, I'll let you share a little bit about why you're here, like why we're talking to this media and entertainment conference, because I think you'll be able to present your business and your tie-in to media and entertainment much better than I can.
Well, thank you, Taylor, and it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate Oracle's invitation. So I'm one of the founders of GridMarkets, and GridMarkets serves the media vertical. What we do specifically is we provide a cloud-based rendering and simulation service. So if you're an agency or a studio or a freelancer creating visuals, and you need to create special effects or animations or whatever it might be, there's a step in that process which is very computationally demanding, and we provide a service that addresses that step. So we have large studios, global studios, local studios, freelancers. There's a lot of universities and students that use our service. But that's I guess that's the answer to your question, Taylor, why I'm here to talk about how we serve that vertical and what our offering provides.
Awesome. Well, okay, so now let me share why the hell Oracle's here. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense, Mark, for GridMarkets and for your company to be here. Maybe what some of the folks are wondering is, what does Oracle have to do with any of this? So at a very high level, Oracle about 4 years ago launched a public cloud. So this is a direct competitor with Amazon Web Services and with Azure and with Google Cloud. The big difference, and I think we'll hear some of that today, that we provide, of course, is that we're based on bare metal. Like, we're starting a cloud. We started a cloud in 2016, 2017 to be a cloud. It wasn't spare cycles of a productivity tool or of a bookstore or anything like that. It was specifically designed to provide the best performance, the best stability, and the best security in the public cloud. We have no illusion like that we are 6 or 7 years behind some of our competitors, but we're catching up very quickly. And so today we've got millions of cores, hundreds of services. We compete head to head. What I really enjoy about working with GridMarkets, and I'm not going to, Mark, I'm not going to hide anything. I'm going to share some of the things I don't like about working with GridMarkets. But what I really enjoy about working with GridMarkets is they push us as a cloud. I think, Mark, when we started working together, Oracle had like 5 regions maybe, and we're up over 20 plus now. There's a lot of hardware that Mark asks for. There's a lot of capacity Mark asks for that we have to work very hard to make sure that that GridMarkets is successful. And Mark, I hope I'd like you to share kind of some of the challenges that you face dealing with the cloud, with multi-clouds, with Oracle specifically. That's going to be, I think, critical as part of this. But really happy to have this opportunity and to work with GridMarkets. So, Mark, we got into a little bit of it, but can you help me understand like how your rendering customers, how your media and entertainment customers have responded to COVID? Like, what has that meant to your business, and how have your customers responded, and then how have you had to adapt for that?
Well, I have to say, when back in, I think it was March of last year, when the idea of COVID started to emerge, and it became clear it was going to be a pandemic, it was quite frightening for us. We're still a small company. We have a global footprint. We serve studios around the world. But it was a scary thing. And when the world awakened to that, our business just dried up. And there was about a 2 or 3 week period where we were really concerned about our existence. And this is one of the examples of how the partnership between Oracle and GridMarkets is really something significant to us. In that moment where we were feeling very desperate, I contacted Oracle and spoke to Taylor and others and explained the situation, and Oracle stepped up and helped us to not only survive that onslaught, but frankly, to really thrive. And and as it turned out, the business quickly turned around. There was more of a need for cloud-based solutions because of COVID, and we were a cloud-based solution, so we saw our demand surge. But Oracle really stepped up, bent over backwards to help us, as I said, not only survive that, but frankly, it completely flipped on its head. We started getting inundated with demand, and at that point, then we needed a partner who was extremely responsive, had the capacity, and also very importantly would, so to speak, handhold us through this really demanding time. Again, the situation reversed. We were getting calls from people, studios, universities, who were desperate because they were locked out of their local resources, and they couldn't access them. They didn't prepare for COVID, and so they started looking for solutions that would allow them to continue their work, to complete their projects. Texas A&M. There's a Forbes article on Texas A&M where I remember we got called by them, and their students were locked out, and there was no way for the students. Their students were kind of mid-semester, and some of them seniors trying to complete their projects, and they no longer could do that. And so Texas A&M was, super concerned, understandably, about this, and they contacted us and started using our service. So that all resulted in this influx of demand, which we never saw before. Excuse me. And here again, Oracle stepped up. So we were in need of significantly more capacity from Oracle to serve this demand. And, as I say, Oracle stepped up and delivered many more machines to us. And thirdly, as I mentioned, they were very attentive. Oracle was very attentive in helping us to step through this process. Things weren't smooth, nothing to do with Oracle, but just because, when you're bombarded with things in a very narrow time segment, stuff happens. And so we had to work through that stuff, and Oracle was a fantastic partner to help us work through that stuff. So I think we would most certainly not have the success that we have had over this last year or so if it hadn't been all those efforts with Oracle.
Absolutely. So how, when in the media and entertainment space, when customers are coming in, like to do rendering, to bring, big, massive rendering jobs, like what does that workflow look like? Is it simply they upload their assets and, select from, whatever their list of applications that you support?
So the simplest way to imagine it is, if you were printing a document, you would open up a print box and it would ask you what pages you want to print and what printer and so on. That's the simplicity of the workflow that we offer as well. It starts by, you have to sign up. There's a sign up page, gridmarkets.com/sign up. You get an account and then you get a download. There's a small plugin that we have created, and you choose the download depending on what 3D software you're using. So we support Houdini, Maya, 3ds Max, Blender, and Cinema 4D. So if you're using any one of those, you download the appropriate plugin. And then from that point forward, again, it's like the print workflow where you're inside whatever your favorite 3D software is. You push submit, and the dialog box pops up, and you tell us then through that dialog box what frames you want to render, how many machines you want to use, what configuration of machines you want to use, and then you hit submit, and off it goes. And behind the curtain, this enormous complexity unfolds. But from the end user's point of view, it looks super simple. You just answer a few questions, push go, And then you get a dialogue, a progress box, which says, okay, your submission has been received. It's being processed, and you get real-time telemetry at that point on the status of your submission. So you'll know how far along it is. And as the frames get completed on our side, they get returned to you on your side. And you've designated in that dialog box, you've designated a storage location. So the folders then are returned to wherever you designated that location to be. And you suddenly see the frames showing up. So again, push the submit, answer a few questions, frames start coming back. That's it. But again, it's a very complex thing on the back end. What's happening on the back end is GridMarkets is interacting with Oracle via Oracle's API, and we're spinning up machines with the right software, with the right patches. You know, there's all sorts of different combinations of 3D software and rendering software. On the rendering side, we support V-Ray, Redshift, Mantra, all the standard renders for, you know, the default renders for 3D solutions, RenderMan, Arnold. And so when we receive your request, we have to match up the 3D solution with the rendering solution and at the right versions that you want. So you might be using, say, an older version of Redshift or a newer version of Redshift. So we have to spin up a machine with the right version. And all that happens at the blink of an eye. And it, you know, hopefully from the end user's point of view, it will look like magic. And that's, you know, that was one of our design goals, to make this from the end user's perspective so simple that there'd be nothing to learn. There's no workflow changes required. You don't have to change your pipeline. If you're a studio, you just simply insert the plugin, and you know, literally you can be up and running and submitting in seconds.
That's really cool. And I guess I'm interested. You know, I love it. Like, the concept, I think, is beautiful. And from a cloud provider standpoint, it's, you know, it kind of becomes this platform where we're able to enable you as a media and entertainment subject matter expert to, you know, do what you do and let your customers do what they do. And we can focus on, you know, the back end, the infrastructure, the networking, and the compute. So it's a fantastic story. The next question I think that I have, and I think most people should have, is how is this market, like the rendering market, let's say, moving to the cloud, number one, and then number two, how do you, and then this is probably a separate question, but how do you leverage and how do your customers leverage multiple clouds? Because I think what we encounter quite a bit with Mark, with you specifically, is, you know, you may come in and ask for 200,000 cores, you know, in this one very specific data center, one very specific region. If we don't have that, how do you go across multiple clouds? So first, how is the industry moving to the cloud? And then second, how do you address a hybrid model?
I think the first, certainly before COVID, the answer would have been kicking and screaming. The media vertical, I hope I'm not pissing anybody off, but I found it to be a laggard. I actually came from the financial services industry before I started GridMarkets, and that industry and other industries were much earlier to adopt cloud. But in the media vertical, it was not that way. It's, you know, it's a classic laggard. But excuse me, here again, one of the things I think that has happened because of COVID is it forced this industry to move into the future. And there was no choice because of, you know, the reasons that we had talked about earlier. But having said that, I think even if COVID hadn't happened, it would have naturally progressed, probably at a slower pace, because the benefits are just too compelling. You know, we meet studios who have their own local instances and use them, obviously, and which is a great idea. But every studio at some point is going to encounter a bottleneck, and they'll have a project that is too big, or they'll have a shot that is too complex, or they might have a series of opportunities which collectively exceed the capacity that they locally have. Or we've met also a number of studios who are using this time to establish themselves for the first time. So you have a lot of artists who have worked at big studios, and maybe they've been let go, so they're reassembling into a new studio, or they're taking this opportunity to live their dream and to start creating their own studio. And so they have a blank whiteboard, excuse me, and they can configure the infrastructure and the pipeline however they want. And because they're starting from scratch, they're saying, why should I buy all this local equipment? Of course, they need local desktops and so on, but why should I go out and buy a bunch of servers? I'm not a technology person. I don't want to hire technology people. I don't want to have to maintain that infrastructure. I don't want to have to accommodate the space and so on. And so they're going directly to cloud. So it's a really interesting time where, again, this is fueling GridMarkets growth, not just COVID, but the transition from the old world to this new world. And I think the other thing that's happening is it's becoming accepted. The part of the issue that a laggard has is there's reluctance. There's also a bit of a herd mentality, and they're starting to see the herd, so to speak, adopting this technology, this approach. And so things are actually accelerating now, which is a very typical adoption cycle, part of the adoption cycle. And so we're seeing many more studios embracing this, and in some cases, when it comes time to refresh or renew their local infrastructure, they're saying, don't want to do that. That's a headache. That's a hassle. They might significantly downsize it because you still need some local resources to do quick renderings, perhaps to look and see and make sure that things are visually what you want. But for the big heavy lifting stuff, it doesn't make sense to have the local infrastructure anymore. I think I answered your question, Taylor, but you asked a compound question.
You nailed it. And before the hybrid question, and maybe it actually ties in with the hybrid question, John Schilberg on the call, on the call or in the room, whatever the heck this is, had a great question about what does it look like from a data pipe perspective. All of these artists are working from home. They have massive data sets. They're generating massive data sets. How is that getting back and forth between to each of their homes?
So GridMarkets, in a sense, is a central repository, and for a virtual studio today, and this happens. These are our customers. There will be maybe an artist in South Africa, an artist in Toronto, another artist in Vancouver, and they are working together on a shot. In fact, if I digress slightly, the COVID relief program that GridMarkets and Oracle put together to help artists get on their feet during COVID, one of the beneficiaries of that was a producer in Trinidad and Tobago. And he was producing a very compelling story, and he needed, our services, and he applied for a grant, which we then gave to him and underwrote his rendering expenses. Again, this was jointly done by Oracle and GridMarkets. And in his production, because of COVID, and frankly, also because he was in Trinidad and Tobago, there aren't a lot of artists in Trinidad and Tobago. He was forced to create a virtual team of artists. So he had people in different locations, physical locations around the world. They were collaborating using GridMarkets' central storage solution. So artists were checking in and checking out assets, but they were in a central location. And as it stands, our architecture physically co-locates that asset store next to the processing nodes. And so from the point of view of the artist, there is no lag when it comes time to extract those assets and make them the input to the rendering process. It happens lickety split because, if you think about what's physically happening in a Oracle database, in an Oracle data center, there's the GridMarkets file store and the GridMarkets processing nodes. And as I said, there's the latency between them is nothing. So it's a very convenient architecture for folks like this guy in Trinidad and Tobago or anywhere. It also works, by the way, for very large studios. They do the same thing. But the other thing that is interesting about this, what we've done is our workflow allows you to simulate in our cloud and to then kick off a dependent render. This might sound not so significant, but it turns out in practicalities, it's very significant because the simulation process typically involves a relatively small data input. And let's say you're simulating an explosion, for example, or a crowd scene or whatever it might be, smoke and fire. So the input to that is relatively small, easy to transmit from your local machine to the GridMarkets cloud. But that creates an enormous, very voluminous data file. And that data file, in fact, it describes, if we're doing an explosion, for example, where all the different pieces are in the explosion and what their accelerations are and their trajectories and so on. And so you have this huge data set. Now, you would normally, if you didn't use GridMarkets, you would have to download that giant file and then upload it again to do a render. So we have bypassed that. Our workflow allows you basically to upload the inputs to the simulation, maintain that as it expands in volume on our cloud, and then kick off a dependent render. So nothing is downloaded. You go from uploading your sim to doing your rendering to then downloading the results, the frames. And so that saves on a lot of the transmission of data back and forth, and obviously accelerates the process all the more. So we in short, we accelerate the time it takes to complete your rendering by throwing many machines, 1 to hundreds of machines at it. Machines obviously coming thanks to Oracle, but our workflow also has these optimizations, so to speak, built into it, which also contribute to the acceleration. So the end result is, what might have taken you weeks to render something, if you were to use GridMarkets, it takes days to do that, or sorry, hours, I should say. Excuse me. Taylor, you asked about the. Sorry, just wanted to touch on you talked about the hybrid cloud. So the back end of GridMarkets, as you understand, is connected to Oracle, but it's also connected to other clouds as well. So you're right. Sometimes we route a request to another cloud to get the resources that are needed. For example, we often receive requests to render using GPU resources, and those are scarce and hard to find. So if an input comes in that is a request to render using a GPU resource, and say Oracle doesn't have those, typically you do, but sometimes you don't. We then are obligated to find a source of that. So the back end of GridMarkets connects to multiple clouds. So GridMarkets is in fact, if you were to use GridMarkets, you would be leveraging a multi-cloud solution from the start.
Cool, very cool. So I think John Schilberg, I'm sure he appreciated the response. He wants more detail. Does he need a 10 meg pipe? Does he need a 5 meg pipe? Can he do it over his cell phone? What do the artists need, actually end up needing?
A normal internet connection is sufficient. So we have some customers who have, dedicated and expensive bandwidth, but it's not necessary. It kind of depends on how big your project is, what sort, and typically, by the way, if you have a large asset repository, it will take some time, obviously, to get that uploaded. But once it's uploaded, it stays there. So then you're only transferring differentials. So if you make a change to a texture file or whatever it might be, that differential will be then uploaded. And so thereafter, it becomes very small. But most of our customers, in fact, I can only think of one occasion. There was a studio in San Diego, and they were doing, they had multiple terabytes of assets. And it took us several days to get that up. But once it was up, as I said, then it was practical from there. But most people aren't uploading that amount of data. And so as a consequence, it's a very practical solution to use. Sorry, I can't answer your, I'm happy to take it offline with you, and we can actually do a test if you'd like. I'm at mark.ross@gridmarkets.com if you want to drop me a line, and would be happy to take it up with you.
Very cool. I'll actually, I'll type your mark.ross@gridmarkets. I'll also put in my email in case anybody needs it. And I know that that we're all like Zoom exhausted. So I don't want to go too much beyond 45 minutes past the hour. And so with the last couple of minutes, Mark, and I think you'll understand what I'm getting at here. But the technology that you guys have built, utilizing your technology, utilizing Oracle Cloud and other clouds for rendering, for media. How else can that technology be utilized? Like, you've made this available to everyone, not just artists, not just renderers. Who else can take advantage of it, and how are they taking advantage of it?
Well, we found out after building this thing for the animation industry that it was actually applicable to almost any scenario where you have a complex, computationally demanding workflow that can be parallelized. And so we started thinking about how we could extend the platform to serve other use cases. And there are many of them. There are hundreds of them. For us, it was actually an exercise of trying to narrow down what would make sense for us, because we didn't want to spread ourselves too thinly. So we wanted to pick some very juicy, shall we say, opportunities. And as I said, I came from the financial services side. GridMarkets actually started out serving hedge funds, running genetic algorithms. That's a good use case as well. We decided not to go deep in there for reasons that I'll spare you, but what we did do was, and somewhat serendipitously, we met a computational chemist. I didn't know what a computational chemist was, but a computational chemist designs molecules for the purpose of creating some therapeutic effect to address a disease or whatever it might be. COVID has involved a lot of computational chemists figuring out how to design molecules to effectively neutralize the spike of the COVID virus. And they design these molecules in the computer first, and then they simulate the effectiveness of those molecules. It's very much like the rendering process, where instead of creating a scene, you create a molecule. And once you create your scene or you create your molecule, you need then to simulate and see whether or not you're getting the performance. In the case of the media side, whether you're getting the visual performance you want. In the case of the molecule, whether you're getting the therapeutic performance you want. And this is all done, if you will, artificially inside the computer first, before you then commit to creating that thing. And so the computational computational chemistry workflow is to create a synthetic molecule in the computer, evaluate its performance, and they do that over and over and over until they get a molecule that is performing as they hope. And only then do they go to clinical trials with that, right? So this was a perfect use case for us for a variety of reasons. It's very complex, it's super demanding, and it's very, very repetitive. They scan through literally hundreds and thousands of molecular possibilities. And so we took the platform, which is work agnostic. Our platform does not know, that it's working on an animation or special effects, or now it does not know whether it's actually simulating a molecule. But the process is identical. If you think about it, you need to upload data, you need to spin up machines, X number of machines with certain configurations. You need to allocate to those machines the right software so that it runs the right combination of software, the right patches, the right versions, and yada, yada. You need to monitor all that, orchestrate that, make sure that you get the results that you want, and you need to send those results back. That generic description applies to media, financial services, computational chemistry, all sorts of things. And so in theory, our platform could extend to address a whole family of similarly challenging issues and use cases. So yeah, we've this computational chemistry solution, drug discovery solution, I guess is maybe a better way of describing it, also runs on the Oracle platform. And over time, we're going to sort of eat our way. Plan is to eat our way through that landscape of use cases and just extend it as far as we can.
Very cool. That's Mark. That's extremely exciting to hear. And I think in this industry, in media and entertainment, in animation, I think so many times we get almost tunnel vision on the stuff we do, because it's very cool, it's very exciting. It's neat to hear how the same technologies here can be applied, to many other aspects and many other areas. So I'll go ahead and wrap up. And again, I'd like to thank everybody that joined us, and Mark especially. Thank you for taking your time to talk with us today. Here at Oracle Cloud, we, as Mark talked about, and really, Mark, you didn't mention some of the things that we've tripped over as we've been working together, but here at Oracle Cloud, we look to address the workload, these exact workloads that Mark has been talking about, standing up large clusters specifically for media and entertainment, specifically looking to support platforms like GridMarkets, and we've seen that not only for Oracle does this make business sense, and does this leverage technologies that we've had for years and years, but it also provides significant value to our customers, and that's for us, that's really kind of the perfect connection. And not only GridMarkets. So GridMarkets is fantastic because they make this platform that other people can come in and use and do their rendering. But we also have customers like Zoom, for instance, that are leveraging Oracle Cloud and leveraging those data centers globally to stand up hundreds of thousands of cores to allow us to communicate with one another. And so it really, all of these things together really provide significant value for our customers and ultimately for the world. So thank you all very much for your time. Mark, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Taylor.
All right. Have a great day. Stay safe, everyone.